Yeah, welcome back to Bruises, where every scar tells a story. I'm Jessica Elmish. I'm the author of Camouflage Bruises, a memoir of loyalty and betrayal. And today I'd like to unpack normative behavior. What do we consider normative behavior then and now? In the past, and then we're going to crank it forward, present time. What is normative behavior? I think it's important for us to wire it together, multi-generational approach, right? There's this quote from my book, from Camouflage Bruises. The quote actually is, I will change. I need to change. I am the problem. Now, this is something that I was saying to myself. It was a rendition in my mind when I was a teenager, living a tumultuous childhood. And well, how did I get to this point, right? Literally like training myself that I am the problem, I need to change. This is a literal quote from the book, in chapter 1 from my book, Camouflage Bruises. And that is because even before I entered the Marine Corps in 1991, my home environment was telling me these things. These messages were being pressed on me. Jessica, you are the problem. It's not anything else, not family dynamics, not heterodynamics, not society at large. It's you, Jessica, you are the problem. In fact, my stepfather at the time that I, insert sarcasm, affectionately referred to as number 4, because my mother's now married her 6th husband, so I started to refer to them by number. But in the book, number 4, he actually told me one time, you're not a normal girl. And I really didn't know what that meant at the time. It was about, I think I was 13 years old when he said it to me. And we had a very challenging relationship, to say the least. It was abusive. As a young woman, I came to understand what that meant. I was neck deep in the Marine Corps by that time. And what I realized was that when he told me, you're not a normal girl, what he meant was I wouldn't acquiesce. I wasn't taking orders from him as a man. He was also a police officer. By the way, I'm pro-law enforcement, so don't make any assumptions about me. But he was clearly used to being in charge, right? He was a hetero male authority figure, and this little girl would not take instructions from him. I was rebellious. And that made me abnormal as a girl at that time. So, when you're that young and you haven't really formed your identity yet, these messages that are impressed on you, they can be very powerful and hard to deprogram. So for a long time, I thought that I was walking planet Earth. I was the problem. I needed to change. So I entered the Marine Corps, and I'm getting some of the same messages from the Marines around me, the leadership. And that, the story kind of ramps off from there. It is the journey that we will go through together if you read the book. But that quote in the beginning in chapter 1, I will change, I need to change, I am the problem. This gives you an idea of my mindset as a girl, as a teenager, before I even enter the adult world. And why do I think that quote is so important? Because we need to really be careful. And I do speak to the younger generations, but also I know people my age still that are grappling with this. You need to set boundaries with outer messages that devalue who you are. You need to really go deep inside yourself and learn to embrace your voice. Make that the primary voice. Make that the real that's running in your mind. Don't let all these outer messages form your identity and inform you who you are. That comes from within. That has to come from. It took me many years to learn this, and I'm giving you the cheat sheet right now, so you don't have to go through what I went through. That's why, out of all the lines in the first chapter, anyway, that one really I think is really important. For me, it was important for me. It was a learning experience. As a writer, even. Because I had to reflect back on all of those experiences. So that line really stands out. That was a line that I was telling myself, okay, over and over again. And if that's happening to anyone out there, again, you need to stop right now. You need to stop it right now. We're going to talk about what's normative. Well, what is normal? Well, the governor of Florida, Mr. DeSantis, he has his own ideas, right? But we'll talk about him on another podcast. But in terms of what is really normal, you're normal under the eyes of God. Was there a manufacturing defect with you? No. You're actually quite normal just the way you are. But you have to recognize that from within, right? You have to embrace yourself. And I know it can be really challenging to keep the outer messages at bay. Look, don't strive for external validation. I know it's hard, especially as a young person. Like, easier said than done. Jessica L. Mish, author of Camouflage Bruises. I know, it is. It wasn't easy for me. It was very difficult. That's part of the coming of age journey. But what I'm trying to implore you is that don't wait. As soon as possible, start drawing those boundaries with the external messages about who they think you should be, what is normal to them, okay, is not necessarily what is normal for you. Go deep inside and search for and embrace internal validation. That's where it starts. You're going to save yourself a whole gob of stress, maybe even years in therapy. I'm telling you, I'm giving you the cheat sheet again. You could skip all that today and start building your identity from within right now, today. I know it can be challenging to draw boundaries with family members, friends, colleagues, people in your church community. It's all coaches, mentors, people that say they love you, they care for you, they only want the best for you. What feels normal to you? Okay. You can even invent your own title. We have LGBTQ, and we're adding numbers and letters as we go along, and that's fine. But even there, don't limit yourself. Who are you? I'm not even speaking to my own community. Don't try to force people to fit into any of those letters and numbers that we have assembled up until this point, 2024. Everyone has a God-given right to an individual identity journey. And so I speak to, obviously, the heterosexual community and my own community as well. We have to learn to respect people's individual identity journey. How people feel about themselves, that is completely normal. Even if we don't understand it, they have a God-given right to an individual identity journey. So that's why I selected that quote in my book in chapter 1, this rendition, this recording that I kept telling myself, this inner voice. I will change. I need to change. I am the problem. You know how many years I wasted unraveling that? I'm giving you the cheat sheet right now. You can unravel it today. Don't do what I did. So many years of angst, telling myself that I'm the problem, trying to fit myself into this little mold that other people said I needed to package myself into. No, bust out of that right now. If anybody's trying to package themselves for someone else, bust out of that mold right now. It's not even necessary.
What do you think about people that feel like they have to physically change to fit what they think would be their normal?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And I think I touched on that, but I'm going to go ahead and elucidate. How you feel about yourself is normal. And if that means changing your clothes, changing yourself physically, that is normal for you, there's nothing wrong with that. Even if there's a limited number of bathroom signs, okay, let society catch up with you. Don't stop your individual identity journey. Let society catch up with you. And full disclosure, I'm not perfect. I know earlier I touched on, I'm kind of sneakily putting myself in this professor's chair. I look like possibly I'm someone that's a teacher, an authority figure on this. Actually, no, I'm going to tell you right now, I am a student in my own community. People look at me, a quick little story. I entered a community cafe, LGBTQ cafe, right, in another state, not in California. But it was a LGBTQ community, small community. And I went into the cafe. I sat on their little velvet sofa with my little latte. And this person comes in and sits on the sofa across from me. There were two sofas in this cafe. And the person looked like they might be in transition, but whatever. I don't ask questions unless people want to disclose what they're doing. I just was talking to this person like I would talk to anybody that I was being casual and polite with in a cafe. And sure enough, the person disclosed to me that they were in transition. And they said, well, how about you? How's your transition going? I'm like, this is an interesting question because I'm not in transition. I've never been in transition. I've never wanted to be in transition. I said, oh no, no, I'm just an old-fashioned lesbian. I'm actually a woman, and all the original parts. I'm proud to be a woman, but that's great that I supported her in her journey, and she said, no, really, it's okay for you to tell. Like, she wouldn't believe me. I'm like, oh, I'm pulling this thing off, right? They think I'm a boy. Like, no, really, I'm not in transition. I'm a woman. And I was really struck by the persistence of this person in my community, that they were trying to convince me that I just hadn't embraced my authentic self, that deep down I wanted to transition. And this is what I'm trying to say to folks. It's not, my message isn't just for the heterosexual, side of the fence. I'm also talking to my own community. Let people have their own individual identity journey. Just because you think I should transition into a man, I have never had that desire, and that's okay. I'm okay to be a lesbian and wear androgynous clothing, or maybe even some, I think they call it mask now, mask lesbian.
Yeah.
This may be offensive to some people, but back in the day, we used to call it boy lesbo, Yeah, but now they don't use that anymore. And I noticed on social media, they call it mask. So I'm one of those. And that's okay. I don't have to transition. So I am speaking to my own community as well. Let people have an individual identity journey. Just because you don't understand why that person feels this way, wants to dress this way, or have address their identity in medical ways, or that's their journey. What does that? Pay attention to your own journey. That has nothing to do with you necessarily. Just be supportive of human beings having their own individual identity journey. I encourage this for everyone across the spectrum, from hetero to the whole alphabet of folks.
What do you think about, especially during the pandemic time, people had a lot of time to sit with their own identity and their self, and a lot of people afterwards started coming out and, queer, trans, any of that. And now we have society saying it's a trend to do so.
A trend to come out?
Mm-hmm. Because
post-pandemic?
Yeah.
See, that's why I'm the student. I had no idea that was a trend. Like, I had no idea there was a demarcation point where during the pandemic, folks were evaluating, going introspective, and then coming out. So this is, yeah. I mean, what do I think of that? Well, ultimately, I think it's a positive thing. I mean, anytime someone wants to claim their authentic selves, it's always a positive thing.
What do you think at the fact that now society wants to say, oh, you're just trying to be trendy now with these people? Everyone came out after the pandemic, and now...
Oh, the trendy thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I skipped over that. Let me get back there. The trendy. I'm going to touch on Mr. Governor Mr. Ron DeSantis for a minute, and what he's doing of the destruction that he's laying out in Florida, the state of Florida, essentially putting legislation in place that targets transgender folks. And really, I'm not transgender, but I take this personal. This is my community, and that could easily spill over into other areas. So Mr. Ron DeSantis is saying things like, oh, we can't have trans people coming into schools and reading to our children because they're grooming them. You can't, if I'm any evidence of what is not, it's not possible to groom. Look, I was in the Marine Corps surrounded by all of these young, muscular, hunky men. I think I had 3 marriage proposals and I never took a stitch of clothing off of them. So if you could groom a person into being another sexual orientation, that would be, the opportunity to do it. In the Marine Corps, put one woman with 350 men in a barracks. But no, it's not possible. Just like this is not a trend. You see, people don't sign on to change their sexual orientation or their gender, as they say now, right? Because it's cool. These are very serious decisions to come out because we do still face backlash. It's a risk. It'll, well, not always. We hope we're going to get to the point where it will never be, which is also part of the purpose of the podcast, right? To keep encouraging this discourse, to keep encouraging this conversation. This is not a trend because there's nothing trendy about worrying if your parents are going to disown you. There's nothing trendy and fun about the possibility that you may be let go from your job. There's nothing trendy about you going into a federal occupation and suddenly your spouse isn't eligible for benefits, maybe because legislation isn't there caught up yet, or it's going to change. Now look at our Supreme Court. There's nothing trendy about wanting to sign on with what the heterosexual team considers a losing team. What? No one wants that. And, to bring it back to camouflage bruises, very early on, when I was in the Marine Corps, my first duty station, actually, Pearl Harbor, I remember I was really grappling with my sexual identity. I knew I was a woman, but it's sexual orientation. And I write about it in the book that I was having a conversation with God. It was more like pleading and begging. Please, make me straight. I even kind of feel a little tender talking about it, actually. But I wanted no part of being homosexual. No part of it. Because I knew what I would face. It felt like a disease, honestly. Who signs up for this? And why did it feel like a disease? Tell me why. Well, we know why. Because the heterosexual society sends us these messages. We're surrounded by it. And it was more intense back when I was coming of age, but it's still there in place now, which is why we're here with the podcast, because we want to push back at this. There's nothing fun about claiming your authentic self and worrying that you're going to lose your friends, your job. Back then, I would have been labeled a felon and put in the brig, which is prison. And by the way, when you're charged with a felony in the Marine Corps under the UCMJ, that's right, it carries over into the civilian world. You're a felon in the civilian world as well on your record. So, there's nothing trendy about signing on for a non-heterosexual identity. Not at this time on planet Earth anyway. In my book, Camouflage Bruises, there was a moment where I had to face myself. I was becoming so lonely. And there was no escaping the fact that I was not romantically or sexually attracted to men. no matter how much I wanted to be in terms of I wanted to fit in, because by the way, back then, to be an outstanding Marine, you had to be straight. You didn't qualify actually to be a Marine at all unless you were heterosexual in the 90s. So there was this great pressure on me because I wanted more than anything to be an outstanding Marine, right? I was an expert rifle shooter. I was a fast runner. I could do more push-ups. And, I was blazing trails, but darn it, I couldn't be straight. And that was a requirement to be an outstanding Marine. So being the perfectionist that I was, I had to figure out how do I do this? Well, I pretended I would hang out with, some of my male buddy friends. There were plenty of guys that wanted to be with me, so I would just sort of pal around with one, and everybody would think I had a boyfriend, but really no. But that's how desperate I was to try to, that saying, fake it till you make it? Yeah, no. When it came time to take the clothes off, I'm like, yeah, I can't do this. Get back. I just can't. Leave my room. Just get out. I could not be straight. The Marine Corps was failing to groom me into a heterosexual. Even though it was trendy, by the way, to be a heterosexual on base. I still couldn't do it. Get it? So yeah, one starry night, I'm pleading to God, please, make that attraction that I had to that female it was just a fluke, right? It was a phase. That's not me, right? That was just, don't make me gay, please. Now, you know how they say silence speaks volumes? Well, God was not going to turn me into a heterosexual. It was clear. So the message that I got from the celestial above, like, no, you're going to roll with what I gave you. I didn't make a mistake. This is who you are. Let society catch up with you. It may be difficult, but you can do it, Jessica. Those were challenging days. When I talk to my friends now, they think that I've always been this way, this very confident, sure of myself, comfortable with myself. This is years in the making. Years in the making. And part of the reason why I wrote Camouflage Bruises and for launching this podcast is to show you, to light this torch, to show folks who aren't, some are already. So if you're there, great. You're also a part of the solution. But for those that aren't there, I want to show that, okay, this is through the book. Yes, this is a bumpy road. It can be a bumpy road. Laid out with trauma, even compound trauma, multiple traumas. And some people turn to addictions, and some people, there's a lot of maladaptive behaviors that can come from trauma, not being able to cope. But I'm here to show you that it's so possible for you to come out of the shit pipe standing up on your own 2 feet and feel quite normal, actually. It doesn't matter what Mr. Ron DeSantos says or, what's, the peanut gallery saying this is a trend. None of that matters. What matters is, did you make it through? Are you standing on your own 2 feet now, embracing yourself, loving yourself, and join the discussion? Join the discussion and help others to come through that, to cross the bridge, that very challenging, scary bridge. I equate it to the Coronado Bridge. Has anybody been to the Coronado Bridge in San Diego? Driving across it can be a bit intimidating, but you can get across. And we're here to help. Mm-hmm.
What do you think, too, going back to military and things being normal, how do you think the military has handled having gay, trans, lesbian recruits now in today's day and age?
I think it's an unfolding process. They're adapting. It's kind of like when we were trying to sample, can women be in combat? I was a part of that sampling when they sent me to jump school. And I talk about that in the book as well, in the chapter, A Jump Decision. When society is making an effort to evolve, there is that learning curve. and we're not going to get it right away. I think that's where we're at in terms, especially in the military, when it comes to how do we accommodate, how do we adapt, how do we accept recruits, active duty service members that don't fit the binary hetero identity dynamic. What do we do with them? I think it's positive that as a country, we are trying to evolve. So we do have to give some credit there. This is, by the way, it's a miracle that we're even talking about it now. Unheard of back when I was in. It just was, it was an impossible mission. Yeah. Just was never going to happen. But the fact that we're talking about it is very positive. And this is also why I want to have a conversation with the younger generations. You have every reason to be full of courage and love for yourself in 2024 today, because you're in the conversation at the legislative level. Pick up that flag and run with it. Don't censor yourself. Don't be silent. And okay, people say people are going to say all sorts of things, like water off the duck's fucking back, as far as I'm concerned. Whatever, but it doesn't matter what they say. Just continue to be true to you, and let society catch up with you.
So what about? I mean, it feels like the government, society, right? We take one step forward, two steps back for the queer community, and from you till today, we've made a lot of progress, but we're also now seems like starting to go completely back in time with legislation.
Yeah, I did touch on that in the new foreword in the book Camouflage Bruises. I updated, not only is there a prologue, but I actually updated a foreword, a 2024 foreword, to touch on that issue. It's also an impetus for me even being here on this podcast. It's definitely something that it's challenging, but we're in a very strong position to self-correct, to even with Mr. DeSantos. If we stop censoring ourselves and stop being silent and stop, this is what I was telling myself back when I was, a teenager. I will change. I need to change. I'm the problem. If we can stop telling ourselves that, then we can course correct and can continue to evolve as a society here in the United States of America. And I'm here to be a part of the solution, and I'm here to continue to encourage that conversation. That I have noticed, I haven't been living under a rock, I have noticed that our country has become more polarized. And there have been some politicians that have capitalized on this and encouraged it. Even in this environment, even in this political environment, we still have a very strong footing. You have legislation. We have social media. We have each other, but we have to step forward and claim ourselves. That's our strong card right there. Like, really, it just goes back to what would Jesus do? Love yourself, really, under the eyes of God. There's no manufacturing defect. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not a trend. This is who you are. Step forward, and as a collective community, we can course correct any traction that we have lost in the past 8 years. We have every reason to be optimistic. Mm-hmm. To put things into historical perspective, we could crank it back to the 1950s. And, for me, those were, the stories were in my history books. The Lavender Scare. Does anybody remember that? By chance, anyone? No, you can Wikipedia it, or you can do a chat GPT. But the Lavender Scare, which, it was a law in place that you know, excluded homosexuals from federal employment, including the military. Clearly, that's federal employment. And so it was very much, in tandem with McCarthyism, and, hunting out the communists. Communists and homosexuals had to go. These were not Americans, and we were susceptible to being manipulated by, foreign agents. So we had to root them out. And that carried over into the 1990s when I was in the Marine Corps. Actually, I remember when I signed my military documents to, with my oath, that I would uphold the Constitution. And I had to lie. Because one of the questions was, are you a homosexual? And I was like, well, I know in my 17-year-old brain, I'm like, well, I know I've had homosexual, same-sex thoughts, but no, I'm not, no, never will be. So we've come a long way. We still have work in front of us, and there are politicians out there that groom their constituents into thinking that their way of life is the supreme and only way of life under the eyes of God, as if the way they love, the way they dress, the way they live is somehow the only standard for humans on planet Earth, that this is universal law. And I'm here to tell you, or at least remind you, for anyone who's in doubt, that this is not true, and it never will be. So, Mr. DeSantos, speaking of grooming, stop grooming your constituents to hate other humans that don't look like you, that don't dress like you, that don't love like you. Because you're taking us back to the 1950s, and we will not stand for that. So I'll see you on the next podcast. Again, this is Jessica L. Mish. I'm the author of Camouflage Bruises, host of the podcast Bruises, where every scar tells a story. We'll see you next time.